Losing is something that every single day trader has to deal with. But the way that you deal with that is going to be a huge factor in your success in trading. Because the best traders out there, they're not only good at winning trades, but they're also great at losing trades. Because what a lot of average traders do is they might, like, let's say they win $1,000, they win $1,000, they win $1,000. Then they go on tilt and they take like a $5,000 loss. That $5,000 loss from one day is going to wipe out the profit you had for multiple days. That right there is something that's going to have a long-term impact on you, right? That one losing day completely destroyed your whole week of trading. You can't be letting things like that happen. So today in this video, I'm going to explain to you my personal advice and experiences in relation to coming back from red days and how I handle them, how I control myself, all those type of things. So with no further ado, let's get straight into it. So first, we'll talk about preventative measures. So if you're trading on a platform such as like Alpha Ticks or like TopStep X, like anything on Project X, there's going to be multiple settings that are going to be very useful for you. So there's a maximum daily loss limit you can adjust, right? So you could say, hey, when I hit $500, like just close the trade and lock me out of my account for the day, right? Because you can lock yourself out. So you can have a lockout for if you lose a certain amount of money. You can also have a lockout for a certain amount of contracts. You can have a lockout for a certain amount of trades, right? There's all these different things you can lock yourself out. So you can look back in your strategy and say, hey, after I take 2 trades in a day, my win rate just goes really down. Because you look like back in your history, let's say if you look at just the third trades you took, how often are you winning that third trade? Let's say, for example, second trade, right? Because everyone's strategy is different. For me, it might make sense to take 2 trades in a day, but for you, it might not actually make sense, right? So pretty much the first thing you should be doing is looking back in your data and just set those lockouts. And if your platform doesn't actually offer that, so like let's say you're using like Tradevate, for example, and you can't put it for whatever reason, you can just mentally say, hey, this is my limit. And then you can also say to yourself, if I break this limit, I'm going to punish myself in some way. So let's say I limit myself to 1 trade a day, and then I crash out, I take 2 trades in one day. So pretty much at that point, I could define my punishment for myself as like a cold shower. Or I could say I have to go run a mile, right? And then after that, next time you want to go break your rules, you're going to be like, oh, well, if I do that, you're subconsciously going to know I'm going to have to run a mile again, right? If you're being disciplined and actually holding through with your punishments. So it's basically just negative reinforcement to get that action out of you, like to get that habit, I should say, out of you, right? Then beyond that, in that moment, once you actually, like, let's say you take a loss, right? Let's say your trigger is you take a loss and you immediately get the urge to get back into some other trade to make that money back quick, right? So outside of your trading, you got to think about this. Just think about how clear it is to you right now, how over the longer term scale, right, your performance goes down after you take that first trade. When you're getting out of that first trade and going back in really quick to another trade, and you're subconsciously thinking, hey, I want to make this money back, I want to end the day green, or whatever your like thought process is that's not healthy, right? So think about how deep down this isn't a good idea, right? Now, write that down somewhere or just make a promise to yourself. And then in that moment, think how you were thinking previously about how before you were actually in this moment feeling this emotion, you said, hey, this wasn't like a good idea. And you're also going to think, hey, in that moment, I'm going to be influenced by emotion and I should keep this in mind. So if I'm feeling a strong urge to do something, my body, my emotions come into play and I make wrong decisions because of my emotions. And I've done this in the past, right? And also, if let's say you keep doing it, right, you say to yourself, hey, this is what I'm going to do, and the punishments aren't working, right, make a list. So you should have a trading journal regardless. But if you don't, start one. But in your trading journal, one of the things I actually have is there's one checkbox where I mark, did I follow my rules? Yes or no? Like, am I executing my plan the way I would have liked? Then at that point, I can see a list of all the trades where I just didn't execute the way I would have wanted. And then let's say a month goes by, right? And you're not following your rules. You can then look at this list and be like, oh my God, over the past month, like 2 times the first week of the month, I didn't follow my rules. And then the next week, I didn't follow my rules for 1 day. And then like the next week, whatever happened, right? But pretty much though, it's going to hit you a lot harder when you can look at this log and be like, wow, I'm so undisciplined. It'll make you feel bad about yourself and it'll really give you that motivation that you need to actually get that discipline that you're going to need to actually like execute properly. Because I feel like it's so much harder than it sounds. Like you can say, hey, we're taking 1 trade a day, we're risking $500 a day. But I feel like every trader knows it's just not that easy. It's like a huge mental battle that people that are traders, they just don't understand really. So once you've gotten away from the charts and placing another trade isn't really something you're concerned about at this point, right? So now you need to accept this loss. This can be the next step. And for me, the best way I accept losses is I determine exactly what type of loss I just experienced, right? So in my head, I categorize losses into two separate categories. So the first category is when I was following my plan, right? So there's a plan I'm following. I know it makes money over time. I've back tested it. I have data backing the strategy. And I know over time, if I execute this same strategy, I would be proud and I would be happy with the results, right? So if that's true, I'm not going to beat myself up over this loss. It's just a loss that happens inside a statistical edge, right? Because if you win 70% of the time, that means 30% of the time you are still losing, and there's no way to get around it, right? Having a 100% win rate is going to be impossible. And if you expect every single trade to be a win, you're being unrealistic, you're expecting the impossible, and you need to remember your strategy has an X percentage win rate. You want to compare it to that win rate, not to a 100% win rate. Because also, I talk about this a lot, but the human mind, it likes to think that if I was negative on the day, I did something wrong. But in trading, just because you lost money on the day, it doesn't necessarily mean you did something wrong. If you followed your plan that you know makes money over time, it was a losing day, it was part of the statistic, and you should come back tomorrow and be trading the exact same setup. So if you took one of those trades right, try to keep that in mind. Don't beat yourself up. Remember, it's a winning day. Even though your P&L is red, you technically lost money. If you executed your plan perfectly to the T, if you look in hindsight and you're like, oh well, I don't think I missed anything. Like, because you always want to look in hindsight too and say, oh, did I miss something? Well, is there something very obvious? But if there's nothing obvious you missed, and you say in hindsight this was still a good trade, that's the best type of trade. It's still a win in my book. You got to remember that, right? Focus on that and it'll carry you through that emotion you're feeling. But on the opposite hand, right? The other category, let's say you took a loss and you broke your trading plan. That right there is when you should be feeling some guilt. I mean, obviously, there's no point in sitting there and beating yourself up all day long because that's not going to get you anywhere. But you should be having some negative reinforcement, right? Like I was talking before, give yourself some form of punishment. Because if I take a loss where it's 100% on me, right? Because there's days where my strategy would have given me a win if, let's say I execute on a trade where all my confluences wasn't there and I enter early, right? It gives me a loss later in the day. Another setup appears, but I can't take it because I limit myself to one trade a day, right? Then I miss out on that win. That's going to be one of those situations where maybe you should beat yourself up a little bit, right? And then you also want to log that, like that log I was talking about before, put that in log. And if let's say you keep on losing, you can't follow your plan, try different things, right? Maybe you can have a journal and you write in your journal every time you break your trading plan, right? Every time you make a mistake, you write in it. It's like your punishment log, and you can see all of your failures just back to back. And eventually, one of these days, you're gonna be flipping through these pages and be like, "Oh my god, I gotta like get serious about my life. I gotta get serious about my trading. I can't keep throwing money at these prop firms of the market, or whatever you're trading, right? Because eventually, if you keep trading in a stupid way, you are gonna lose money, right? That's how trading works. So yeah, so you just gotta pretty much figure out what type of loss is this, and focus on reminding yourself that it was either a good loss or a bad loss. Because not every single loss is a bad loss, and many traders think that's true. So hopefully now you've walked away from the charts, you've come to terms with your loss. The next step is we got to reset your confidence, because even though you might have accepted your loss, you might be like, I'm kind of scared to execute tomorrow. What if I lose again? Or whatever thoughts are going on in your head, right? So for me personally, the best way that I build confidence is I just do some back testing. Me personally, I do a little bit of back testing every day, but especially I feel like it's especially important on those losing days, right? Because when you lose, you're like, your mind has a thing called a recency bias. So you're going to see that loss and it's going to be the thing that's freshest in your mind. So your mind's going to think back to that loss and you're not going to be as confident as you were before. But then if you go and do your back testing, you're going to say, hey, you know what? Like I took 5 trades in one week and like 4 of them won, right? So that right there is going to stick out in your mind. So for me personally, I do use FX Replay for my backtesting. It's my favorite software. There's also going to be a link down below, and if you use that link and code TIMB272, it's going to get you 15% off. So go check out FX Replay. But use whatever backtesting platform you want to use, right? Any one of them is going to gain you confidence. You could even, if you wanted to use a free one, you could even use the replay tool in TradingView, even though me personally, I don't think that's a good idea because it's pretty wonky. But so now, hopefully, you've gone through your day, you've taken your trade, right? You lost your confidence, but then at the end of the night, you sat there, you went through some price. You said, hey, you're right. You know, my strategy works. I proved that to myself. I saw it in live time. I've gotten rid of this recency bias in my mind, and you're ready for the next day. So honestly, right there, I feel like that's a golden routine, right? So pretty much, first focus on getting away from the charts once you realize you're on tilt and you realize your account might be in danger, right? So get away from the charts. You got to start thinking, reframing this loss, recognizing what type of loss it actually was, good or bad loss, and from there you want to build back your confidence, right? Remind yourself that your edge works X percentage of the time, and if you're expecting it to win 100% of the time, you are being unrealistic because no one wins 100% of the time. Not a single person. If they were, people would be breaking down their doors like hedge funds. People would be trying to shove millions of dollars in their face to buy this 100% win rate, right? Because no one has it. The highest you're probably going to get is like 70 to 80 for being realistic here. And if you're crazy, you might get a little above 80. But I honestly feel like 80 is the upper limit for humans. And that's trading like, let's say, a 1-to-1 risk to reward. That's my opinion. I mean, I'm sure there's some outliers. But my last piece of advice is just to focus on facts, not feelings. So what I mean by this is at the moment that you're going back to review your trades, you want to focus on what you knew at that moment in time when you placed that trade. Because it's going to be very easy for you to look at that trade and say, oh, well, because I know the end result, I really should have known this gap was going to hold. And you're subconsciously going to connect because you knew price went up. You can see the whole chart. You can see how it played out. Your mind is going to connect the dots and say, oh, well, it's so obvious that this gap down here is going to hold. But before you actually saw that gap hold, I'm not sure that you'd be that confident in it, right? Because it can be a learning experience, but there's also a thing is unrealistic expectations. Because you can look at every single trade and say, hey, I should have known that gap was going to hold. But there's certain instances where there's a gap holds where it shouldn't hold. Like it makes no sense that gap held, right? So every single time, price isn't going to act logically, right? You don't want to think that every single time there's a 100% answer, that there's something to be changed in your system, right? Because remember, part of your system is going to include losses. So focus on the facts, not the feelings, and just think, in this moment in time, am I proud of the decision I made? So to wrap up, I also just want to remind you, if you're looking for a prop firm to trade with, my favorite prop firm is Alpha Futures. I'm going to put a link down below along with my discount code, which is code TIMB272. If you use that code, you're going to get 10% off all evaluations at Alpha Futures, or you're going to get whatever the best current discount is. So go check out Alpha Futures. I love them personally. But if you watch this video all the way through, I'd really appreciate it if you could give me a like, put a comment down below, and subscribe. And I also just hope you have a great day.